Hi, I'm Mercedes Pfab here at the Captured on Canvas studio. Welcome to Picture This. For today's painting, picture this. It's a beautiful morning and you're canoeing through some backwaters. The sun has a nice gold hue in the sky reflecting on the water, and we got a silhouette of some overgrown grass and flowers on the shore. Before we get started, let's make sure we have everything in front of us. Most importantly, there should be a 10 by 20 canvas that we're going to be painting on to make our masterpiece. On our paint palette, we should have these following colors: a lot of white, gold metallic, this is a raw sienna or gold tone, primary blue, and some black. For the brushes, I'm going to use the large square tip brush, my middle-sized angular brush, and last but not least, a tiny round tip. And don't forget to have a cup of water and paper towels for cleaning those brushes. To get started, I'm going to start with the background and paint the closest thing last. That being said, I'm going to use that large square tip brush, and I'm going to start mixing a nice sky blue color. I'm going to prep all the sky colors first so that they can blend nice on the canvas. So I'm going to start with a big scoop of white and separate that on my palette. Then I'm going to add a little bit of blue until I get the darkness I want for my sky. I want to warm it up a little bit, so if I just add a tiny bit of this gold, I'm going to mix that in. It's going to tone that color down a little bit. Alrighty, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe off that extra paint on the side of my palette, and I'm going to go ahead and clean it. So the next color it's going to blend into is the white, and then I got that golden color. So let's go ahead and prep that. I'm going to start with a big scoop of white off to the side again, about a size of a quarter. Then I'm going to add a big scoop of that raw sienna. Mix that in. I always love those metallic colors, so to make this fun and kind of shimmery, more like the sun shining, we can add a little bit of that gold metallic and mix that in. Alrighty. Looking at the two colors together, I like it, so I'm going to go ahead and clean off this brush here. Now I'm going to start from the top and work my way down. I'm going to go into that sky blue color here that I mixed. Start at the top of my canvas, going left and right all the way across. Blend into is the white. So let's go ahead and clean off our brush. And now I'm just going to take a little bit of white. I'm going to start right underneath that aqua color and then blend it together. So all the way across, I'm going to add this white. It's kind of funny, I'm painting a white canvas white right now. Then I'm going to take that brush halfway on that blue, halfway on that white, go back and forth, and that's going to be what gets that nice blend between the two colors here. You can get fancy and add a little bit of white up into your blue, making it look like clouds. And don't forget to blend in those sides as well. All right, now for the next part, I'm going to mix into that gold. I do not need to clean my brush for this, so I'm just going to dip right into that gold tone. I'm going to do exactly the same blending steps. Start right underneath my white, all the way across. is complete. A little bit more to our background, we have that water. So we're gonna start building up our water. We're gonna go ahead and clean up our brush for a nice clean start. Now water, there's a lot of layers, but I'm gonna go ahead and prep the main color of my water. I want it to be a little bit darker than my sky color, so I'm gonna go ahead, just use that color, add a little bit more blue to it. And I like that little more aqua or teal color, so I'm gonna just take a little bit of that mustard, mix that in. All right, so I like that. First step's really easy. We're just gonna go ahead and color all of our water area, which is the second half of our canvas, with this color. So nice long brush strokes again. Try our best to get that nice straight line between our colors. Now that I got it colored in, I'm going to start adding a little bit of the waves to it. I'm going to take a little bit of this color and darken it a little bit more. So I'm going to take some more blue, mix that in, and even more of that yellow as well. Maybe a little bit more blue. Just dance between the colors until you get the color you like. So I see a good contrast between the two colors. That's what I'm going for. So I'm gonna make sure I don't have too much of this paint on my brush just by wiping it on the side. I'm gonna hold my brush horizontally. So when I go left and right, it's gonna make a nice thin line. I'm just gonna dust a few lines over here on the left side, starting to create a little bit of a shadow from where I know my land is gonna be over there. Maybe some on the right side here. Very light pressure. The more you go over it, the more it's going to blend in. So it's good to blend some areas in more than others. So maybe just a quick swipe and then go over some other areas a little bit more. All right, we're going to go ahead and clean off our brush. And in the center here, we're gonna have a little bit of that glow from that gold sky. So we're gonna take a little bit of that golden color, holding that brush horizontally still. We're just gonna add a few lines through the middle, creating that reflection from that sun. Kind of focusing on the middle area. Occasionally I can just add a little bit a little further out to the left and to the right. Light pressure. All right, so now we got our canvas all colored in for our background. We're going to take a little break while that dries before we go into our next part. Welcome back to Picture This. We have just finished painting the background of our canvas, so now we're going to start building up a little midground and foreground and the silhouette of the land and even the canoe. So I'm going to go ahead, use my large square tip brush, and I'm just going to use black. I'm going to mainly hold this brush horizontally when I start, just to make nice thin lines. Then I can use it just to color everything in as I go. So I'm going to start here with some land on the left side. I want it to go maybe about halfway across my canvas. And because it's a shoreline, it might not be straight, so that's all right. We can just make it a little wavy. Going out about halfway across. And then from here, I'm going to make the top of the land. I kind of want it to get taller as it comes over to the left. Create some height there as it comes closer, and we want it to be really rigid. So honestly, the shakier you are right now, the more natural it'll look. We're also going to continue that around the sides of the canvas as well. Then I'm going to go ahead, color it in. Nice long brush strokes. Don't forget about those sides again. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the right side. I'm just going to add some more land. I like to leave some space between because obviously we have to have somewhere we can go in our canoe. So I'm just going to start over here, a little bit of space. Once again, making that shoreline, kind of a rigid line coming down, maybe about halfway down in my water. Then I'm going to create that little hill, kind of waving my way up here. And continue that around the side as well. And color it in. And then I'm going to add another piece of land that's a little bit closer, so it's more of a foreground here, giving it a little bit more depth. So I'm going to come up, overlapping this guy here. Anytime you overlap, it creates more depth. I'm just going to make this wavy line coming down. Maybe I'll even put my canvas up on my little ledge there so I can get to the bottom easier. And then I'm going to continue about halfway across. Continue with the black, and I'm going to make that canoe silhouette. I'm going to have it kind of peeking out from the corner here. So I always like to make a couple dots for reference. I'm going to start with one dot right at the tip of my canoe, kind of in the middle out here. So just using the corner of my brush to do that. Then I'm going to draw that straight line down to create the nose of that canoe. It's going to be at an angle, so always this is a little tricky. Sometimes I like to draw that center line. I may come down here near that corner here. Then it's easier to make it symmetrical for both sides. Maybe I'll bring it up a little bit. Then I'm going to make that rounded edge of the canoe. So still using that thin side of my brush, I'm going to curve it up and back. Then I'm going to do the same thing from that tip again. Make that other side at the top of the canoe coming down. And then we got the bottom of the canoe right where it meets the water. It's just going to come down right there. So it kind of looks like a bunch of scribbles, but it'll happen once we add the detail to it, it'll all come together. So remember to go around the sides, and we're simply just going to color it all in black. So nice long brush strokes. I always like to take a step back and look at it, make sure it looks good. Getting your eyes away from it for a minute. There we are. So I'm going to go ahead and clean off my brush because I'm going to do one more thing. While that black's just a little wet, I'm going to add a little bit of that gold back in there, give that dirt some color and a little bit of reflection. So I'm going to go ahead and clean off my brush. And now I'm going to dip into my gold. Just add a little bit of texture. You could do figure eights, little X's, scribbles, whatever floats your boat or whatever floats your canoe. Just going to add a little bit towards the top of my land here. Just kind of working as a little bit of a highlight. Start with this one here. And last but not least, we got this guy down here. So you can dabble like I'm doing, or you can swipe. Now I like to allow some of the areas to get blended in more, some of them a little thicker. Alrighty, and there we are. So we got all of our silhouettes started, so we're gonna let that dry again before we start the flowers, so we'll take a little break. Welcome back to Picture This. We have just finished our silhouette, so now we're gonna work on some detail in the canoe and even in the grass. I'm gonna go ahead and use that angular brush now. I'm just gonna use some gold paint, and with this brush, I'm gonna start with using the thin side of it to make those thin lines. So using some of that gold metallic, I'm gonna start adding the highlights to our canoe. I'm gonna start with basically outlining it just inside that black edge. So I'm gonna start from the tip and go back just near that edge there. And now I'm basically gonna redraw that other line that we did with our black before for that other side of the top of the canoe. And remember to breathe when you're drawing these lines. I always hold my breath. Then I'm gonna hold my brush standing up, and I'm gonna create some of that, kind of a wood grain actually. The brush is gonna do the work for me. So I'm gonna hold my brush standing up, and then I'm gonna follow that curve going down that side of the canoe. Just kind of flick that brush away from the canvas as you pull. Now I'll add one more right beneath it. So now we're gonna continue that same technique using the wide side of our brush to add that bench seat. I'm gonna start in the middle, and I'm gonna have this angle. So it's almost perpendicular to that original first line that we drew. It's coming from over here, gonna angle down, coming near that other side of the canoe. And I want that seat to be a little wider. So now I'm just gonna do a couple brush strokes next to each other there, kind of flicking it away as I pull down. Then I want to add a little bit more to the front of the canoe. So I'm just going to add this little curve here. And then I'm going to color that in. All right, so now we got our canoe. We're going to go ahead and clean off our brush. I'm going to use a little bit of black now to add some of that grass on the land. So with the black, I'm going to use that same angular brush. Very light pressure, I'm just gonna always flick up. So you're almost pulling the canvas up and away at the same time. I'm gonna start over here on the left land here. Just kind of dancing that grass. We want it about 2 to 3 inches tall. Some might be shorter, some might be tall, some might cross in front of another. Very light pressure. Area, we're going to come down here, and because it's closer, we're going to make this grass a little bit taller. We might just have those leaning over the water again. have the black, I'm going to go back and refine a little bit more on my canoe. I'm going to do some partial outlining. So if you got any areas that the gold touch, maybe I want to go back and outline around the top. Each area here. Just kind of smooths that line back out. I want there to be this little bracket up here, so I might just add these little lines across. I can use the tip of my brush, add some bolts on there. And then maybe we'll make it so the seat's like a couple pieces of wood. So we might just draw one line through the middle. And once again, maybe we have some nails in that seat. You know, outline the rest of it, just kind of refines it a little bit. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and clean my brush and we get to start the fun part. We're now going to work on the wildflowers in our background, and I do want a little bit of leaves and greens in there. So I'm going to go ahead and prep that color with a big scoop of that raw sienna, still using that same brush. And then I'm going to add a little bit of that primary blue. I'm just slowly adding until I get that green. So there's my color. All I'm going to do is let the brush do the work for me. I'm just going to use that long angled side of the brush and just do a couple touches. So it's basically a lot of dabbling. Sometimes I relax my wrist so that the brush bounces back from the canvas more naturally than thinking about where I'm going to place each and every one. So I'm just going to place them near the tops of some of these stems or the grass. Sometimes I like to add some kind of floating up at the top. Gives it that cool painterly look. Once again, I put maybe a little bit more pressure for that land that's closest to us. Get those leaves a little bit bigger as they are closer. Once you have that, we're going to go ahead and clean off our brush. I'm basically going to do that same thing now to add some of those wildflowers. I want to tie some more of that gold color back in there. So you can use actually some of the sky color if you have some of that, or you can even use that raw sienna. I'm going to start with that lighter shade. And this time I'm just going to use that little fine tip of my brush. Once again, same thing. I'm just going to kind of hover these towards the top of those stems and the grass. Just a bunch of dabbles. A little bit more highlight to it. So I'm going to go ahead first start cleaning that brush. And I'm going to go to that large square tip brush. I want to add a little bit of whites in there. I'm going to do a fun technique, but it can be a mess too. So I'm going to start with a little bit of white. I'm going to separate it on my palette. I'm actually going to water it down. So I'm going to take this brush, dip it in the water, and mix it right into that white. So it's just a big old puddle. Now with that, I'm going to do a flicking technique. So I might need both hands for this one. I like to hold my brush in the one hand, and then I'm going to take my finger and pull back on the hairs. So then it just splatters on the canvas. And I'm going to focus around the area that I have those flowers. This is just going to make it look like a lot more is going on in the backgrounds there. So just keep splattering. I like to hold it very close. You can see that this can get everywhere. Sometimes you can throw at it, and that'll get some bigger splatters, so there's a couple ways. But I always like the flicking, a little bit more control. All right. So make sure to clean off that brush, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. So to finish your artwork, you always want to sign. I always like to sign either with the tiniest paintbrush or sometimes a marker. With very light pressure, I'm going to use that black, or actually I might use a different color this time because I always like to sign in my lower corner and that's all black. So maybe I'll just mix a couple colors there in my brush. Sign my name. And then I also like to date it. It's always fun to look back and see when you did that painting. And that concludes our canoe masterpiece. Thank you for following along with me, Mercedes Pfab, at the Captured on Canvas studio for Picture This.